Hello and good morning. Welcome to Morning Show at Kantipur TV. I'm Somesh Verma and we have with us today Nandita Das, the famed Indian actor. We should also welcome Nandita.
Thank you.
We should also tell our audience that Nandita is here for a film festival, Indian Film Festival. So Nandita, this film festival is about changing ethos, the role of Indian heroine. So do you really think from 50s or 60s the role of Indian heroine has changed over the years?
Yes, I think times are always in transition. You know, you see a 50s film, they will still say the same dialogue that these are bad times. And we think 50s were glorious times and, you know, the present time is bad times. So we're always in transition. I think the stereotyping of heroines has also changed. They've still been stereotyped in some ways by the mainstream. But in every era, there have also been alternate cinema. There have also been within the mainstream films heroines that have been portrayed in a different light, or stories that have brought out, powerful struggles of women and the strength with which they have negotiated. I have really come to this festival more as a speaker and not so much representing any film. Mm-hmm. And the topic that I spoke in the festival was about wearing different hats, because I'm seen as an actor, but I've also directed my first film, and I'm also involved with human rights issues and how I wear all these different hats and how they're not so different.
We're definitely going to get there. Your first directorial debut, Firak, has been a success, as many would claim it. How did it come? I mean, you always wanted to be a director?
No, actually I never even wanted to be an actor, to be honest. I got into acting by default and I've done about 30 films in 10 different languages. And many of them are regional films, which probably here you won't be able to see in Nepal. Even in India, people in Delhi, Bombay wouldn't know of those films. But for me, they are very special because they have in fact compromised less in their work. So whether it's a Bengali film or a film from Kerala or Karnataka or Maharashtra, they've all added in some ways to my understanding of women's issues, of cinema, and just overall growing up. So I would say that, films have been important, but with that, as an actor, you're still waiting for good projects to come to you. And I have always lived in Delhi, which is far away from Bombay. So I think the desire to direct and to tell your own story in your own way was always there. Although I didn't think Firak was going to be my first film. Firak really again happened by default.
So let's just stop you there. And
yeah.
You said it happened by default. You did not even want to be an actor. Did you wanted to follow your father's footsteps?
No, I think because he's a painter and as a child I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted and didn't have anything to rebel about. I made a very stupid decision because all his friends would say, oh, you're Jatin's daughter, so are you going to be a painter? And I would think, why does a painter's daughter have to be a painter? And I absolutely stopped painting even as a child. And that's the only thing I really rebelled about. And so I never really wanted to be a painter. I did my BA in geography, my master's in social work, and went on to working with NGOs, then got into acting with Fire as my first film.
It was released later. I guess your first film that came in the market was Hazar Chaurasi.
The first film that came into the market, in Indian market I would say, was Hazar Chaurasi Ki Maa by Govind Nihalani, which is part of this film festival. But I actually shot for Fire before that. And that's how over 14 years I've done quite a few films.
Yeah, Fire, when you came with Fire, it actually caught fire within
yes.
the society. It came as a very, very bold statement. Did you always wanted to do something like that? As you say, you're also a human rights activist.
No, at that point of time, it was just a story that I thought was interesting because it dealt with issues of homosexuality, something that we don't openly talk about, and definitely not 14 years ago. Even in my very liberal family, it wasn't something that we really discussed at home. So I just thought it was interesting that, and it not only talked about issues of homosexuality, but also the lack of choices women had. It also had to do with arranged marriage system, so it had many layers to it. And at that time, because I didn't know if I wanted to be an actress, I wasn't thinking of that as my first film, because I didn't even know there was going to be a second film. So
why do you say that?
Because I didn't want to be an actress. So when it came to me, I wasn't thinking, oh, should I do such a bold film as my first film? You only think of it if you're ambitious, of wanting to be an actress, and you think, is this a good or a bad stepping stone? But I didn't ever want to be an actress, so I didn't see it as a stepping stone to anything.
Yeah, but there would have been some doubts when the project came along.
Sure.
Because of its storyline, and I'm sure you were aware to some extent what a furor it's going to cause.
I was aware of the fact that it will cause some amount of controversy, that there will be debates about it, but I didn't think it would actually be physically attacked. I just thought it would create a public debate, and I thought that was a good thing for any society to grow, to have a dialogue, to debate about issues of importance. It is a good thing, and it is an issue that we kind of pushed under the carpet, pretended it didn't exist, or thought it was not part of Indian culture. So in some ways I thought of it as a positive move towards more progressive thoughts, towards sensitizing society and myself as well. To be honest, I didn't know enough about the issues and the level of stigma that gays and lesbians faced in a society. Because when you're not thinking, when you're in the majority, so to say, you're not really thinking of the other. And when you know less about the other, then you kind of have all kinds of prejudices or ideas or preconceived notions about it. So for me also, it was a film that made me into, I think, a more sensitive person.
14 years since it was released and such a controversy was caused. How do you look back on it? Did it actually change something personally as well as on the social level?
Well, very few films have had sort of a very overt impact on society. I mean, there have been many great films I've seen, and I don't think films can create a huge social change or something. They create those little baby steps towards attitudinal change, towards our responses. It raises questions. So I do think films and books and work of art all are important in making us who we are, in helping us groom our responses and our own value system. But a film like Fire definitely had a fairly significant impact because it suddenly brought this subject into the public domain. It forced people to debate about it. It forced people to take a stand. It forced people to question themselves and their own prejudices. And like I said, even personally, my understanding of it was not so nuanced. It was still an intellectual understanding. I hadn't really understood how insensitive a society can be. So for me also, it was, I think, definitely an impactful experience.
Let's also go back to 14, 15 years ago. You come up with the chance to act in a movie like Fire.
Right.
How were you approached, and why did anybody think to offer somebody who was not even interested in movies?
Yeah, it was, I think, I would say, I don't know, destiny. Well, we had a common friend who introduced me to Deepa Mehta. At that time, I didn't know who Deepa Mehta was. I had done a small film which never got released called Ek Thi Gunja, but there was an article written about it. And in fact, before that, I was also offered Kama Sutra by Meera Nair. And everybody said, that time, of course, everybody knew Meera Nair, I knew, and I admired her work for Salam Bombay and other films. But somehow, I didn't connect with the script of Kama Sutra. It was to play the main lead. And some people wrote about it, that, Meera Nair has chosen this young new actress and she has said no to it. So suddenly, when I said yes to Fire, they said she says no to Meera Nair and yes to Deepa Mehta. How sensationalism happens. It was even then, not just now. So, yeah, I don't know. We just happened to meet and we connected. And without even an audition, she had cast me. And that time, I didn't even know that there were going to be other actors like Shabana Azmi who were far more acclaimed and eminent and experienced. But I guess she had the faith, and we did it.
Yeah, we saw that too. So, and how was it to come across somebody like Shabana Azmi, who's been there for years, probably generations?
Right. I grew up on her films.
Yeah, and you just come across with her, and you have to act. Somebody you always.
Well, I grew up with a lot of eminent people in a way, in their own field. because my father being a painter, he had exposed us to a lot of music and dance and theatre and things like, in fact, not so much films. But I had grown up with sort of very eminent people, and somehow one respected and admired, but I was never sort of in awe of anybody, which is not to be disrespectful, but I just felt that each one had a role to play in, in life and in work. So while I was, of course, excited and happy that I was working with such an acclaimed actor, I don't think I got overwhelmed by it, because finally you have to do your own role. You two different people play their own roles, and if you get too overwhelmed by your co-actor, then you wouldn't be able to work. Like I did a film with Amitabh Bachchan, and at that time people sort of asked me that, you slap him in the film and you bite him in the film and you're fighting with him and you have strong lines to your husband in the film saying you raped me, and so wasn't it disconcerting to do that? And at some level no, because you're playing a character, and you see that person as a character, and while you're respectful and admire that person for who they are, finally you're doing your work.
And they're also characters.
And they are also doing their work. So if you get too overwhelmed, then you can't do your work.
Now, is it really important for you to get into the skin of the character, as they say it?
Well, I have never understood that completely, to be honest, because I think it's a very technical medium. Like you and I are talking and we are having this nice casual conversation, but we are also aware at some level that there's a camera there and there's a camera there and there are 6 people who are listening to it, and so it's something that you kind of learn to do. As a newscaster, you would know that, So in the skin, in the sense, there are moments that you kind of forget yourself if it's a really emotional scene and all of that. But otherwise, it's really between action and cut that I completely involve myself and be the character. I don't do too much preparation. I'm not a method actress. I would be lying if I say that I forget myself and I completely become that. Because you actually never forget. So you just think that, okay, if I'm playing this character, then if Nandita was that, in that context, how would I be? That's how I approach a role, and and I think human emotions are so relatable. If you empathize with the character, if you understand the character, then at least between action and cut, you can keep your focus on being that person.